So in this very first series of our Genius Talks this morning, Simon's going to spend a bit of time talking with me about his latest smash hit read, Master Mental Toughness, and a little bit about that particular subject, because in my mind, and I think a lot of you are already seeing this, the hardest part of recruitment isn't necessarily the technicalities of doing recruitment, it's keeping your head straight and focusing on the fundamentals and getting the basics right. And if you can get your mental game right, I think everything else comes into it. I've done the job now for 19 years. And over that period, I've seen that the single most important thing in someone who consistently performs is the mindset they take to it and how they deal with adversity and how they deal with disappointment and come back from that and focus on the process as opposed to the results. Something we've been working on now for the best part of 5-6 years. So Simon, in my view, the mental game is the most important part of it in recruitment. How much do you see the mental game being important outside and everything you've seen around the high performers that you've studied over the years?
To be honest, I mean, lots of people, they do understand that technique's important, skills are important, knowledge is important, and they all are important. But if you look at what really differentiates people's performance, it tends to be what goes on between their ears. I've been working with a couple of high-performance athletes, a couple of guys in sales recently, and I've asked them, what's the value of mental toughness? I mean, literally in sort of pounds, shillings and pence terms, what difference does it make? And a golfer, I was talking to a golfer about a handful of putts that he's missed over the past few months, and the difference that makes to his earnings ultimately, you know, because he earns prize money. That's what happens on a world tour, and he reckons about 4 or 5 putts are worth about 150 grand to him, and they're not difficult putts. I mean, it's not like he's trying a 12-foot or a 16-foot putt. These are regulation 4, 5, 6-foot putts that he could probably do with his eyes shut. So it's not lack of skill that's cost him the 150 grand. It was composure, which is part of your mental game. I asked the same question to a salesperson, and they said that they were lacking composure in a couple of different areas. They went for the deal too early, went for the kill too early. They didn't execute the processes, they just went for the outcome. And over the course of 6 months, that probably cost them about 400 grand. So again, that wasn't lack of knowledge or lack of skills, that was just a change in what went on between their ears. So if you can manage that bit, I reckon you stand a good chance of performing. So
you talk there about if you can manage that bit.
Yeah.
And people talk about, right, you're either mentally tough or you're not mentally tough.
Yeah.
But there's a process of doing it. You talk about the mental skills matrix, right?
Yeah.
How do you see people master mental toughness and move through that remit?
I think one of the myths is you've either got it or you haven't got it, and the truth is you can develop it. You know, we're all in a process of developing it. I've just structured it down into 5 stages because over the course of 20 odd years now of working with high performers in all sorts of areas, you know, lots of them are athletes and sports people. I notice that they want mental toughness. If they're not particularly mentally tough at the moment and a coach says to them, just toughen up, you don't just toughen up, you need a process to get there. So there are 5 stages that we work through. The first one is to actually understand what mental toughness is and isn't. And the truth is mental toughness is not chest beating and it's not shouting and it's not screaming. Often real genuine mental toughness can be quite quiet. You know, it can be quite unassuming. It can be really rock solid, very self-assured confidence. So when you understand what mental toughness is and isn't, you stand a much better chance of achieving genuine mental toughness. I've also noticed that if we can understand it in our own way, very personal way, not definitions and not memes and not any of those other things, but understand what it means to us, we stand a lot more chance of developing it. So just to give you an example, if you think about a time in your life when you've been really resilient, when you've been really challenged, things have been tough, but you've bounced back and you've performed really well even though there's real adversity around you, and you understand what you were like, how you thought and how you felt and what went on between your ears. If you can understand that bit, you can understand resilience in your own way, personally and from your own experience. You could probably also think of a time in your life when you weren't particularly resilient, where something knocked you, and it may not have been a big thing, but it knocked you massively and maybe you didn't come back from it. And now you can understand what in your own life resilient and not so resilient looks like, sounds like, feels like, thinks like, acts like. And then if you just think about it, if you were at your most resilient more often, you'd already be a more resilient person. Just by being yourself, but being at the top end of your own resilience. And the same applies to tenacity or courage or composure or whatever else it is. So that's the first step. If you can understand mental toughness in your own way, that's the foundation. That's step one. Mm-hmm. Step two is all about performing at your best consistently. And we do that when we are focused, confident and motivated. But most people aren't consistently focused, confident and motivated. Most people can be confident if things are going well and be motivated when things are going well, but maybe not when things aren't going well. The trick obviously is to be consistently focused, confident and motivated no matter what's going on around you. So if you can focus on the processes, have a good game plan, just focus on executing the game plan, and know that because you're performing well moment after moment after moment, you can build up some genuinely solid confidence and then work on being motivated whatever happens around you, you know, whatever's going on in life, results, no results, good feedback, not so great feedback, it doesn't matter. You can still be motivated. If you can get that as your foundation, then you can start to build towards genuine mental toughness. Because if I talk about mental toughness in terms of resilience and composure and tenacity, and they're the three main pillars of mental toughness for me, you can't really have any of those things if you don't have focus, confidence and motivation. Because composure really is your ability to execute really well and make great decisions, whatever's going on around you. And if you can't focus on the right thing at the right time, you'll never be able to do that in the middle of a whirlwind. If you're not confident, you're going to find it really difficult to bounce back when things go wrong. Because if you don't fundamentally believe that you can do it, you're not likely to bounce back from it. So confidence really does underpin resilience. And tenacity, which is your ability to just keep going, even when you're in pain, even when you want to stop, you just keep going. You're never going to be tenacious if you're not motivated, because it requires massive motivation. So step two is about having solid motivation, confidence and focus consistently. Once we've got those, we can build the other steps. Holding yourself to account and being self-responsible is the third step. Not blaming other things or other people, which is really quite easy to do. You know, if a deal fell over, you might say, oh, it was the candidate's fault, it was the client's fault, it was this, that, the other. But actually, if you come back to what did I do? How well did I do it? What could I control? What could I do better? Then you start to take real responsibility. Yeah. Fourth step is to what I call enter your discomfort zone. And more than that, seek your discomfort zone and squeeze every possible ounce of benefit you can from being outside of your comfort zone. Most people understand their comfort zones and discomfort zones. Your comfort zone is the stuff that you're really comfortable with and confident with and that you can already do. And your discomfort zone, that's the areas that you're not so good at, that you're not very confident in, you're not very familiar with, and you maybe can't do as well. And lots of people are kind of shy about going into their discomfort zone because they know that when you're in your discomfort zone, your chances of failure skyrocket. Your chances of making mistakes skyrocket as well. But that's the area, of course, where we all develop. So it's important to always keep seeking your discomfort zone. I mean, the truth about it is that if you imagine your comfort zone and your discomfort zone outside of that, if you step into your discomfort zone and you take on stuff you're not very good at yet, your comfort zone grows to encompass the things that you weren't previously good at, but you can now do. And once your comfort zone grows to encompass it, really world-class performers, for them, the alarm bell goes off at that moment. So they step again into discomfort, and then the comfort zone grows again, and then they step again, and they keep stretching their discomfort zone. And in doing that, they understand that their comfort zone's elastic. And actually, the more you stretch it, the more it can stretch. And then they develop this real inner belief that just because I can't yet do it, it doesn't mean I never will. If I can't do it, I'll probably learn how. It's fine, I'll just challenge myself, and then I'll be able to. But the opposite is also true. If you never go near the boundaries of your comfort zone, if you never push towards your limits, your comfort zone shrinks around you and solidifies. And then you develop the belief that if you can't do it at the moment, you probably never will. And actually your world kind of shrinks around you and solidifies, and your comfort zone shrinks and solidifies. And then you lock yourselves into the things that you can only currently do. And you only believe that if you can do it, then that's fine, but if you can't do it, you never will. So we need to be able to step outside of our comfort zone. Once we've done that, we can build the top layer of resilience, tenacity and composure, but not without the bottom four.
Yeah. There's an aspect of recruitment that I've always thought, and it's sort of borne out year after year, that you're at your most dangerous to not do a good month, either when you've just blanked,
Yeah.
or when you've just had your best ever month.
Yeah.
And I think there's two reasons for that. When you've just blanked, it means you're stretching for the deal to make sure you don't blank again.
Mm-hmm.
And the likelihood is because you're doing that, you're going to blank again.
Yeah.
And the second thing is when you've had your best ever month or a great month, you then start thinking there's an element of complacency that kicks in, and you focused on the results and getting everything over the line rather than building for the next month.
Yeah.
There's then a dangerous side, and I think this is one of the most intuitive things you've spoken about to me, which is where you start to focus on the result, and then your focus and confidence moves backwards as that moves further away.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about both of those and how people can avoid that trap and
Yeah.
stay consistent in what they're doing.
So both of them are a symptom of abandoning the processes.
Yeah.
And focusing on the results, on the outcome. And if you want to focus on the right things at the right time, you need to focus on the processes. If you focus on the outcome, you're not likely to execute the processes well, and then you do push the outcome further away. And whether it's complacency, whether it's lack of belief, whether it's despondency, whatever, that stops you just executing the processes, as soon as you come away from those processes, you are far less likely to get the outcome. I also see, if you want to understand something absolutely fundamental about focus, focus follows interest, interest follows what you care about. So if you care too much about the result, you're going to become outcome focused and you're not going to focus on the processes. If you understand that the outcome's important, absolutely, but I really care about executing the processes properly, then you're more likely to focus on the processes consistently and the outcomes will naturally come.
Yeah.
But it's when we get kind of locked into outcome thinking, either by desperation, complacency or whatever, that we start to lose touch on the processes.
Yeah.
And it can be a slippery slope, because actually you can take your foot off the gas on the processes for a while and the outcome will stay good, but eventually the outcome's always going to follow.
Yeah, and that's another interesting side of it that you've highlighted before, which is about the performance and or the process and results curve.
Yeah.
Can you shine some example on that?
Yeah, so if you think about it, in life, this is not just recruitment, this is anything in life. The outcome always follows the processes. So if your processes are good, your outcomes will follow. And there's always a time lag in between. You don't necessarily know how long, but there is a delay in between executing really good processes and getting the outcome from it. And it's not absolutely, it's not straight line. There'll be some dips in that one and there'll be some dips in this one. But largely, if you smooth it all out, that's what you end up getting. The outcome mirrors the process. There are two danger phases. One's right at the beginning, because you can start to increase your processes and work a lot harder and spend more time and energy and focus on your processes, but for a while the outcome doesn't come. And lots of people at that point abandon the processes because they think they're not working. And the truth is they haven't turned into an outcome yet, but they are working. And as long as you just stick to it for long enough, the outcomes will follow. The other challenge is at the top of the curve, when you've got the outcomes. So if your processes start to drop off because you've got the outcomes, the problem is that the processes could dip, the outcome stays good for a while, but they will fall eventually. This is where complacency kicks in for many people. And actually your processes could fall quite a long way before the outcome falls off. And the problem for most people is because they're focused on the outcome, they don't notice the process falling. The outcome, they only notice it when the outcome starts to fall, and they don't usually do anything about it if the outcome falls by a little bit, because they usually call that a blip. It'll be all right, it's only a blip. The trouble is the blip is a sign that actually it's about to fall further. The alarm bell then goes off if it falls a bit further, but they probably won't do anything about it then until it reaches the pain point. And only at that point do they start looking back at the processes and think, geez, those have slipped quite a long way now. And then it takes quite a long time for them to turn round and then for the outcome to follow. If you're not careful, you actually start to lose lose the perspective on those things, because if the outcome's falling as you're increasing the processes, you start to again think the processes aren't working because the outcome's getting worse. And the truth is, it hasn't turned round yet. So if you're always focused on the outcome, you'll get yourselves utterly confused about how on earth you perform well. If you focus back on the processes and just look at how well you're executing the processes, you've got a really good sanity check there. World-class performers don't wait for the outcome to fall. They don't even wait for the process to fall. They know when it's starting to flatten off, and that's when their alarm bell goes off, and that's when they start to improve their performance. And in that case, you might start to flatten off a little bit, but then you'll pick straight back up again. And the very best performers in the world stick to that.
The other thing I see in recruitment circles is where people are going through or have gone through a difficult time, and they increase the the process significantly. Yeah. So more CVs go out the door, more calls get put in, etc., etc. But they're focusing on the wrong sort of stuff. So they focus on it becomes very transactional sometimes, or the relationships aren't put in there. The qualification forms go out the window. Just more stuff happens, or it's directed into the wrong areas, like saying, right, there's a deal, I can go after that particular thing, that's where my deal's coming from, and all of a sudden it doesn't come through, or wherever it is. There's loads of us have been in that sort of scenario. And it's all based around this sort of principle of pressure that you put on yourself to make something happen. You've been quite outspoken about the whole concept of pressure.
Yes.
And you've got your thoughts around it. Tell us about what your thoughts are about stress and pressure, and how you can deal with it or otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, even within sports psychology circles, my views on pressure are quite unusual. My view is that pressure can only exist in one place, and that's in your imagination. Lots of people feel it because it's self-generated. I mean, if you think about it, if you look at what pressure actually is, we feel pressure when there's an outcome in the future that we really want, and there's also an outcome in the future that we desperately don't want. And we kind of emotionally lock ourselves into really wanting one outcome and desperately not wanting another. And because they're in the future and because they're outcomes, they're uncertain. We don't know that we're going to get one outcome or the other, and we start to feel uneasy. You know that pressure is generated in your imagination because everything that's in the future is experienced through your imagination. There's no other way to experience the future other than to imagine it. You know, our life, we've got three ways of experiencing life. Future, through your imagination. The past, through your memory. And the present, through your senses and your thoughts. And that's it. That's all we've got. That is life experience. So if you're experiencing pressure, it's because you're locking yourself into this outcome in the future that you can't control and that is uncertain. But actually, if you think about it, you don't have to lock yourself into that. If you rewind right back out of that, and you are more interested in the process and care more about doing the good job than getting the outcome, then actually you're quite happy to say, I'll focus on the processes in the present, I'll control the controllables, I'll do as much as I possibly can, and I know that the outcome will be what it is. Again, if you think about why salespeople start to feel pressure, sometimes it's because they actually haven't got enough opportunities. So they're over-pressurizing one or two of them. This has got to work. If this falls over, I'm going to blank.
Yeah.
It's got to work. And then because they're over-pressurizing it and they push it towards an outcome, they probably end up destroying it.
Yeah.
Rather than allowing it to be what it is.
Yeah.
And instead of going back to the two lengths of the pool, you know, my job is about placing as many of the right candidates and as many of the right jobs as possible. They start to think my job is to get this deal over the line right now. That's what I've got to do.
Yeah.
Now they're outcome thinking.
Yeah.
They're not thinking about right candidate, right job.
Yeah.
They're way off of their two lengths of the pool.
Yeah. And what happens is when they're doing that and it doesn't work out, they haven't been building up the rest of the process, which then leaves it into it.
Yeah.
Around the whole concept of mental toughness, and I'm going to throw it out to everyone on the floor, so start thinking about that now. It's my little cue. But before we get on to open it up, what sort of if you could give people a sort of major takeaway that you think will be the sort of bombshell that will help people really drive their business forward and get this mental bit right. Yeah. What sort of stuff would you be saying to people on that?
It's the simplest answer, but it's also probably the toughest to do, which is to understand your motivation has to be beyond just the result.
Yeah.
There has to be a wider reason for doing this and doing a great job. Yeah, the result will always be in there. That's fine, but it has to be broader than that. Because if it all hangs on the result, you'll feel pressure. If the results aren't going the right way, your confidence is going to take a massive hit, and your motivation will take a hit with it, and you'll probably start to abandon the processes and become too outcome focused. And it all stems from what motivates us and drives us.
Yeah.
So the simplest answer is your motivation has to be broader than just the outcome, but it's not an easy thing to achieve.
Yeah. Okay.
But once you get that right, everything takes on a different perspective.
Yeah. Brilliant. What do we want to know from the crew? Here we go.
In psychology, for instance, for you to snap out of what you do, you use certain exercises, or you look your eyes, your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Is there certain exercises that one could do to stay focused?
There are some things that work for some people. Little tricks like that tend to be quite short term. In sport, lots of people, if they're feeling pressure, will try and, or they're thinking thoughts that they don't want to be thinking, they'll try little tricks to get out of them. There's one called thought stopping, where you snap an elastic band or something like that, or click your fingers to stop your thoughts or whatever. The problem is, if you're really, really scared, it's not likely to help. If you're not motivated by the right things, or you can't muster courage or whatever, it's really not going to help. They can help sometimes, and they usually help when the challenge is fairly small. But for the really big things, sustainable change in the way that you're thinking and feeling and approaching challenges usually is a little bit deeper. So yeah, if it's little things in the moment, yeah, they can work. And it's really about finding out what works for you, because they're different for everybody. The things that work for some of the athletes that I'm coaching at the moment wouldn't work for me. But if they work for them for in a little period of time, that's great. But they're not. It's a little bit like if you've got a headache and you take a pill. It's okay and it'll last for a while, but it's not the cause of your headache. So finding out what the root cause of the headache was probably is more effective in the long run.
What's your thoughts on small wins?
Yeah,
and the importance of.
Yeah, I think small wins are critical because they help you understand that you're making progress. Again, some people misinterpret small wins because they focus on results and outcomes. Instead of looking at, am I improving the processes? Is my game plan better? Am I improving my processes? Am I doing the job better? Because in itself, that's a small win. And it may be that you make loads and loads and loads of small wins. I call them the green shoots. So there are loads of little green shoots. Some people don't get their eye in and look for them, so they never notice them, even though they're there.
Yeah.
And they're waiting for this massive outcome. So yeah, those are really important. And again, if you can be process focused and really interested in improving your processes, you tend to notice those.
Yeah.
And you can gain real confidence just from the fact that you're improving what you do.
Yeah.
And it's the same if even experienced people go through rough patches.
Yeah.
Go back to simplifying and clarifying. Go back to executing the processes really well. Focus on those. Draw your confidence from the fact that you're executing better, and then just let it build.
Yeah.
So yeah, they are important as long as you're looking for the right things.
I think that's one of the most important things. I remember possibly one of the most important things I ever heard as a recruiter was where I went through a bad spell. I had a new MD come in. This is 10, 15 years ago. And the only question he asked me was, what were you doing when you were doing well?
Yeah.
And what are you doing now? And I looked at it, and you didn't. You immediately the thing you think is nothing's different. You're doing the same sort of stuff, the same sort of things are happening. And then you look at some of the stats behind it, and then you start to think a little bit more critically about what you're doing, and you recognise there's one or two things that you weren't doing when you're successful, and then you start to do those things more consistently. And and you see a tip up, and that's where I think habit trackers become so important. It's something we should talk to everyone about iteratively improving your habits, and seeing, red activity turn to green activity gradually, and then consistent green activity, and then it becomes a habit that forms. That's where things. Do you ever work with habit trackers? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yes, I really like the idea of them. Again, if they're used properly, it's the same. Talking about going back to things you were doing really well.
Yeah.
There's a part of that that's often about quantity.
Yeah.
and there's a part that's about quality.
Yeah.
So you might be doing the same amount, but actually you're not doing it as well. You're not spending as much time on it. You're not thinking as hard about it. I mean, if you think again about what you have to do in your world to really qualify a candidate well,
Yeah.
and really qualify a client well, those aren't necessarily numbers based. Doing that really well is about quality.
Yeah.
So it's about getting both, and understanding that even with the habit trackers, if they're directed towards how do I do this better,
Yeah.
and that's the sort of governing thought process behind it,
Yeah.
they're likely to be really powerful.
Yeah.
Because it's not just activity; it's activity done really well.
Yeah.
That's often what makes the difference. Because you would see, a room full of recruitment consultants, they all turn up at the same time and they all leave at the same time, but they're not as effective whilst they're there, all of them.
Yeah.
There's a massive difference,
Yeah.
and that's not a quantity issue. That's about how well they're spending their time and how well they're doing their job.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking at that level
Yeah.
gets us right back to processing.
Looking into the stuff after the habits have been formed.
Yeah.
It's and this is what we've been talking about now for ages with QQDM: quality, quantity, direction, and mentality. And the four of them are the four ingredients effectively for recruitment success. So if you've got your quality, if you're all quantity and no quality, you're screwed. If you're all quality but no quantity, you're screwed. If you've got both of them but you're doing them in the wrong direction, you're screwed. And if you've got a head that's flying around left, right and centre, you're never going to have the other three as well alongside that. So quality, quantity, direction, mentality.
Yeah.
Simon's going to be here all day, guys, and at various stages where he'll be milling around in between various sessions he's going to be doing with everyone. So do grab him when it's not so many eyes on you asking a question under pressure or whatever it is like that. So that pressure is, however, as we all know now, completely in your mind. So join me in saying a massive thank you to Mr. Simon Hartley.
Thank you very much.